So hopefully you can see my screen here. My name is Tom Deuce. I'm was a long-time physician at U of L Hospital on the Purple Medicine team in the hospital for over 20 years, then kind of transferred over to IT after the later years of my career. I love doing this course because I took this course as a med student myself a long time ago, and I love to share what I know. I also like to the purpose of this is to emphasize the need for art or hobbies or other things that you find interesting to continue through your life as a physician, no matter how busy you are, because it kind of helps with your mental health. My idea for this talk was to show 10 physician artists through time that were influential, or who at least were physicians who were also artists, to show that it can be done. And then I also kind of adapted that talk to include other artists during their times and their styles that you may have heard of. So I'm going to get started. First one is Jacopo de Carpi. Had a hard time at the beginning trying to find artists that had some artistic skill, but weren't just anatomy drawings like the one we have here. But as you'll see, he has some artistic talent as well. He's an Italian physician, wrote a book called Anatomia Carpi, which is an anatomy book. He was named court surgeon to the Duke of Ferrara in 1529, and was kind of an interesting character that seems like he had a little bit of an anger problem, was in trouble with the law often, and was involved in some robberies and attacks of others, but was also a very influential character. He discovered the appendix, for example, and first began treating syphilis with mercurials. Here's an example of his style of work where, you know, he's showing muscle anatomy, but he is also, they have a character, you know, seated with some background illustration. And he would be sort of the high Renaissance period style, which admired classical art and architecture, and to show off their classical knowledge. There's some other high Renaissance characters that you may have heard of. So what is the high Renaissance? Well, usually it's artwork commissioned by the church or other wealthy patrons, lots of religious themes and classical ideas, solid, almost sculptural anatomy in a lot of cases, and then balanced compositions, which was huge. And you'll see that in some others, and beauty and idealism as well. Far removed from the real world of depiction of characters. So this is the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci, a inventor, artist, was involved with engineering and music, the Renaissance man, so to speak. Another example, Michelangelo. These are people I don't really need to tell you about, artists, but known for his frescoes, sculpture, paintings, obviously the sculpture of David that you've heard of, and but you see that the kind of large muscular figures, statuesque appearance. Here's my mouse. And as big, muscular as these figures are, the gentle touch you see here displayed. The third artist of the trinity of the high Renaissance artists is Raphael. And here's an example of the balanced composition that they were known for. And I'll kind of introduce the concept of painting in a composition meant to draw the viewer's eye in a certain direction. You see the face of Jesus here, kind of leaning back through this character and going up to the crosses. Do you see? Whether they're brought down from the cross or up to the cross, sort of the Nike swoop here where your eye goes. Okay, our next physician, Jacob Ruysdael, von Ruysdael, classic Golden Age Dutch painter. And this is a characteristic painting of that age where you see the huge sky, low horizon, with that kind of heroic building, heroic windmill they're known for. Ruysdael is one of the artists who is also a physician, who is actually a very important artist of their time, one of the main figures in the Dutch Golden Age. Advance my slide here. Registered as a doctor in Amsterdam after receiving his medical degree in France, known for his woodland scenes, which I'm going to show you some of. His carefully arranged compositions, cloud formations like you see here. In later years, he had a kind of a darker tone, more romantic in style. The Golden Age had traditions of detailed realism in the still lifes and portraits, and then landscapes that look just like this one, everyday life, landscapes with heroic trees or windmills or buildings. And then you kind of a long view of the horizon with these large clouds, or, big sky. Here's another example of his woodland scene. He was known for his depictions of leaves, trees. This isn't a Bob Ross paintbrush splatter leaf. These are individual leaves. Again, you can see how here's our heroic tree, and then we see how the eye is brought down this path from where this dog and person are, all the way down here, and then into the distance here. Another example. Same thing, heroic tree, eyes drawn down. You can see your eyes drawn to this broken trunk here, and then the limb is down here. But again, you see the use of his way he paints the trees. It's amazing. Other examples of the Dutch Golden Age, you may have seen Vermeer's Girl with Pearl Earring. Other figures, Rembrandt, you may have heard of, Frans Hals, and Vermeer and Ruysch, which I don't think I have any examples of. Vermeer is noted for his use of glazes, which are very transparent, thin paint that is painted on top of another glaze, that builds depth through the layers and shows, or the effect is a soft line, and more realistic depictions of skin colors. Vermeer lived in the same house most of his adult life, and was in his studio was in a spare room in the front of the house where the sunlight came in, and most of his other paintings have this similar scene with the window up here, the sun coming down on the figures. Rembrandt. This is his most famous painting, although more famous for his own portraits, but his big group paintings, which he's also famous for. Here's his most famous, The Night Watch, which is in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which I recently visited and was amazed by the size here of this painting. The figures are pretty much the same as these figures in scale, but it's amazing. He's also, in many of his own paintings, a self-portrait of himself, and I can't remember if it's this guy or this guy. I'm gonna have to look up for the next one, but this is Rembrandt, the Dutch master. Frans Hals, known for kind of his whimsical characters, kind of goofy characters in his paintings, and then let's look at this composition here with these characters. Lots of attention to realism, realistic depictions of fabric, different textures. which is so hard to do. Our third physician, Carl Karras. This is not his painting, but this is a painting of him. This is where we lean more into the Romantic period, where you see scenes of kind of exotic scenes, imaginative scenes. Here's an example of one of his. He likes to frame it in architecture. I'll keep going. The next slide. Born in Germany, Leipzig, which was really the start of the Romantic style of painting. In 1811, he got his Doctor of Medicine and Philosophy. He's appointed professor of obstetrics. From 1814 to 1817, he taught himself oil painting, working under Caspar Friedrich, which is coming up here in a second. Originated the vertebrate archetype, important in Darwin's theory, and wrote a book called Psyche, which introduces the dark side of the psyche, which reminds me of Freud, the id and superego, so forth. Introducing romanticism, sublimity of untamed nature. It's picturesque and, like I said, exotic, unfamiliar, imaginative, escape from everyday drudgery of the Industrial Revolution. You see here another frame, architectural frame, but looking out the window in this kind of imaginative scene, or kind of it looks like a storybook. Another example of that. Looking off into the distance, peaceful. And another. This is the last one I have of his. Is kind of interesting. This most or a lot of the painting is this big, huge rocky coast structure. Kind of looks cold almost. And then around the corner, this distant sunset, warm, calm waters, your eyes brought out to the horizon. Romantic era. Some painters you may have heard of, Francisco Goya, classic, the 3rd of May, 1808 painting. And then in his latter years, he has what's called the black paintings, which you should look up sometime because they're interesting. They I don't think they were meant to be seen by the public. He painted them on the walls of his house, on the inside of the walls of his house. And here's one. He didn't name them, but we have named them. His Saturn devouring his son. Goya was bothered by, at an early age, he had an illness and started going deaf at an age like 46. And a lot of instability in Spain at the time caused him kind of to get a little bit reclusive in his older age and nearly deaf. So there's some interesting kind of macabre paintings in his later years. Delacroix was another kind of the leader of the Romantic period in France, Romantic style. And one of his paintings focused around the French Revolution. And Delacroix is kind of famous for his color theory, his loose brush strokes, and kind of the one of the forefathers, I guess you would say, of Impressionism. Van Gogh studied Delacroix quite a bit, his color theory of complementary color clashes and kind of the emotional scenes. Next artist, George Chicateau, was one of the physicians we talk about here that actually did work his entire career as a in the field as a radiologist, but also a wonderful realist painter who wanted to document the realist or the medical advances of the day in a realistic manner, kind of as a documentarian almost. You can see him here with the he's got a stopwatch in one hand and he's controlling the flame of the Crookes tube in the other to radiate this female, the first treatment for breast cancer with radiation. And of course, he's the most important person in the room with the top hat. It's, the colors are warm, but this is kind of a cold procedure going on here. He is later in his life, obviously ill from radiation poisoning and dies from that. However, he's a good example of the realism of the period. Here's another one of his showing the physician inserting a casing into the toddler baby for laryngeal diphtheria, one of the only treatments at the time other than a trach. You can see all the students on both sides, but a realistic portrayal. Okay, some realists, painters that you may have heard of. This is Gustave Courbet. Realism was a reaction to Romanticism. Instead of idealizing these historic themes and exotic themes, they were meant to convey more ordinary people, observation of nature, also rejection of the academics that were more, of the salon that had more classical poses and kind of boring compositions. This is a more depiction of real life. And here's a self-portrait. The artists Courbet, Millet, and Manet. Here's a Millet, and this is the classic Millet, The Gleaners. And what's important to see here is that kind of in distinction of the Dutch Golden Age, with the low horizons, we have a high horizon, which is above the backs of these workers, kind of showing the toil that they're under with kind of weighing on their shoulders. But it's a more realistic view of the real world at the time. Other realists, some of these artists kind of have one foot on each side of different styles. And remember that artists are artists and very creative, and they don't have to adhere to one style or another, or even know what's going on with the style. It's sort of a construct we put on them in some ways. The Impressionists certainly had their own discussions on what real art was and how to do it correctly. So, Manet, The Luncheon on the Grass, was a very controversial painting at the time in 1863. Although there were nudes commonly in paintings, they weren't depicted in a realistic way where there are other modern men or other modern people in the scene that were clothed. They may be angels or, a historic scene, but not like this where it's more of a natural scene. Down below is a painting in his later years, which is more of the impressionistic feel, but he would have hated if you called him an impressionist, although it's the inspiration to others in the impressionist realm. Okay, next physician, number 5, Paul Colin, born in France, physician and painter who worked with Courbet. He has elements of neoclassicism and realism. We're going to talk about the neoclassicists next. So I have some examples of that on the right. Obviously, what looks like poses in the old school Roman or Greek statue format. Also some romantic. This looks like one of those exotic scenes, obviously. So there's a mixture there. And he also did some paintings of the ocean, which were completely different in just these angry waves and kind of scary seas. And he, again, worked with Courbet, and here's one of his. William Rimmer, I'm going to go on to another neoclassical style painter. Was born in Liverpool, moved to Boston, He was a draftsman and sign painter and then a lithographer, but he was also a physician who practiced in Massachusetts, published Elements of Design in Art Anatomy, known for his great work in the classroom with his drawings on the blackboard. You'll see something later that you could imagine him doing that. So most consistent with neoclassicism. This painting over here, I love the contrast here with the dark, angry clouds, and then up to the top, see the moon and the parting clouds. This is from Macbeth. I don't know the scene. Also, another one of his classics. You've probably seen this pose, and I don't know if this is Ithacus or what, but it reminds me of the Swan Song record label, which I'm sure is inspired by it. If you're a Led Zeppelin or Bad Company fan that has vinyl, this slide is less and less relevant as the years go by. Another Rembrandt, I love this painting here, because I don't know what's going on, and I've looked it up, and I can't find anything that, except for we don't know what's going on either. But you see the figure in the foreground, obviously running. He's got a dagger and a cloak and dagger, and it looks like he's being followed by a couple, at least, people. And then the figure in the background is in the same pose, but ephemeral. You can see through this leg, and it's a little bit different pose. He's got a long sword here, so not sure what's going on. Also, the detail in the architecture is so cool. Here's an example of one of his, what looks like could be a drawing in med school. Looks like a netter. Do you guys still use netter? I don't know. So neoclassicism, there's really, I only have two artists in this category that you may have heard of or seen. The first one is David. But neoclassicism is inspired by ancient Greek and Rome, has smooth, straight lines, a lot of mythology, classical literature, idealized muscular figures that look like sculpture. A lot of times it's very well balanced, muted colors. And here's an example of that balance, a famous Oath of the Hierati, which they look so static. But the detail is just is amazing in these in the paintings. Composition is balanced, but it looks, got the classical architecture behind them. Napoleon, classic painting, and styled in that same format. As you can see, the strength of this horse, portraying strength. And then one of the most talked about or written about paintings that he did, Death of Marat, his friend, who was a French revolutionary, kind of leading the Jacobin movement at the time. The Reign of Terror was 1793. And anyway, his friend Marat was assassinated by a woman who was, also with the French Revolution, but the part of the revolution that Marat was leading was more violent, that according to her. And so she thought that by assassinating him, he would, part of that revolution would be, gotten rid of. In fact, had the opposite effect, because he ended up being sort of a martyr. Her name is Charlotte Corday, by the way, the assassin. This letter in his hand is her introductory letter so that she would see him. It says, if translated, it says, "Given that I am unhappy, I have a right for your help." You can see the stab wound. See the knife down here. And even though this is often depicted as a pleasant look on his face, doesn't look so pleasant to me, but, relaxed. A lot is talked about the negative space above him. Remember this large painting that he can compose this any way he wants to, the figure in the foreground, but he chose to have all of this negative space above the figure, kind of uh, giving an even more morose, depressing feel, I guess. So David, his protege, Ingres, same style, neoclassicism. You can see here he has these flat seated poses, which he's famous for, but then also these started to do these elongated figures. He's known for very smooth lines, or no lines, but just smooth, polished. The elongated figure here, the length of this arm is unnatural, led to a movement called Mannerism, which was fairly short-lived, but those figures are kind of cool. They're long, thin, idealized figures. Seventh physician is Leonid Pasternak, our first Russian, who would call himself an impressionist. He came from a large family and was encouraged not to do art, but instead to do medicine. So he studied medicine at Moscow University, but later devoted his career to painting. He was elected to the Imperial Academy of Arts and taught at the Moscow School of Painting. He was one of the first Russians to call himself an impressionist. Impressionism, I don't know that I need to describe that a lot to most people. It's sort of the most popular style people know. Emphasis on light and its changing qualities, abrupt brushstrokes, movement in the paint. These look actually, this painting more post-impressionist to me, but you can see the different kind of, looks either looks pastel or crayon to me, and this more of the same, but loose brush strokes or pen strokes, and the use of color. Again, kind of an impasto style, the loose, heavy paint. This could be a Van Gogh. This reminds me of the Prisoners in the Yard and the Marching the Circle painting Van Gogh did, you may be familiar with. But the colors just to me look just like that, and more realistic when he wanted to be. So Impressionists, I've chose three: Claude Monet, Renoir, and Edgar Degas. 19th century art movement. Again, loose brushstrokes, color, light. They would use different colors next to each other to convey the real color, the elements of the color next to each other, really giving us the real color. It's the theory that light is made up of, different colors, and our eye puts them together in the way that they should be. These are the haystacks. Quick story: I was in Las Vegas for a conference many years ago, the HIMSS conference, on informatics, healthcare informatics, and there was an exhibit at the Bellagio of Monet that was a very tiny exhibit in these little series of rooms. And I was there with one or two other people in these rooms with these huge paintings of haystacks and others, water lilies. And I was just, I don't know, it was almost an emotional experience there. It was unbelievable. Not that I was a fan before that either, quite honestly. So, Renoir, another one of the famous impressionists, had some pretty bad arthritis, but liked to paint outside. They called it in plein air. Loose brushstrokes, again. I have both of these prints in my house. I think they're unbelievable. This is the classic pastel-y looking impressionism. It's almost too soft, frilly, like beautiful. And then Degas. Edgar Degas did famous for his ballerinas. I think he did 1,500 or so paintings of ballerinas and 150 sculptures. He liked to use mixed media with tempera, oil, and pastels to kind of show the softness of the ballerinas. I did see a statue of this ballerina, which he did in wax, and then the skirt was in burlap. The family, after his death, did cast some of his sculptures in bronze so that they could be more durable. Next artist, Alberto Burri, 1915 to 1996. We're going to talk a little bit about abstract art. He was a World War II physician, and he was reacting against the realism that was popular in the late 1940s, and he turned to abstract art. He used all kinds of different materials, liked to set things on fire, but also used pumice, tar, burlap, and kind of as a way of showing different moods or beauty or form in different in an abstract way, not in a figurative way. Here's some more examples. He'd like to use metal. In his later years, he used metal. I love this one down here, the kind of the spared circle in the middle, and then the cracked kind of destructive layers on the outside, kind of like a little safety bubble in here from all of the angst on the outside. So abstract expressionism, we'll talk about three real fast. The first is de Kooning. And this is the more abstract than, he usually has some figure you can sort of make out in it, but abstract expressionism originated in the 1940s. It was a truly American style, which that was a new thing. Meant to convey emotion. They used large canvases, spontaneous brushstrokes of color, influenced by Cubism, Surrealism, Dada. I wish we could talk about all of those, but they're not in this. Maybe I'll do one on Surrealism later. The famous ones, Pollock, Jackson Pollock, I'm sure you've heard of, de Kooning, and Rothko. So we can kind of get a real well-rounded view of it. So that's a de Kooning. Here's a Pollock, which you could probably tell. And I've seen some Pollocks, they're huge, and you can't take your eyes off of them. It meant to show kind of the anxiety, agitation. It's inside a lot of us in the quote modern world back in the 40s, 50s, how things sort of changed, and shows kind of a frenetic energy that you might feel inside. People always talk about how you can't tell which layer he did first, last, in the middle, because they overlap each other in so many different places. This makes it interesting. Our last one is Rothko. Rothko is famous for this, quote, color field, end quote, paintings. This one, for example, all of his are untitled, I think. This one's yellow and blue. Sold for $50 million or so. That's a story from the Wall Street Journal. This picture, meant to be large, kind of, so if you're standing close to it, you're completely engulfed by the color. You have to convey that feeling. All right, we're getting close. John Leech. I don't have any artists which I should put in some illustrators to kind of what I'm interested in, but he did illustrations for magazines, more depiction of everyday life in London, some comic scenes as well. He published in Punch magazine and London magazine. He did study medicine at St. Bartholomew, but was known for his anatomical drawings, but soon gave that up for a career in art. Here's some more examples of his illustrations. Our last physician is Henry Lamb from Australia, educated at Manchester University Medical School and Guy's Hospital in London, studied painting in Paris, noted for unusual portraits, He did a lot of them during World War II as an official artist. He's considered a post-impressionist. And it's more of, you can see those post-impressionist leanings in his kind of loose portraits. I love this as his wife reading a book. It just feels so warm and relaxed, and how you can kind of feel the weight of her going down into that soft chair. Not so easy to paint. You see those colors that I'm guessing they, kind of conveys something back there. Different colors that I'm sure weren't those colors, but and how they are reflected here, here, kind of the impressionist rule book there. There's another that shows these soldiers are moving either dead or wounded soldier, other dead here. You're looking down a hill to their camp, which has the smoke rising up from bombardment, I'm guessing. I don't know. But then there's these figures that might be smoke, but to me it looks kind of otherworldly, kind of ghost-like forms that are kind of, of the dead soldiers kind of rising. Other examples, portraits, very accomplished, obviously, portrait artist, but still loose work. And here's Death of a Peasant, which it just kind of reminds me of some of the patients. I'm sure you've had some that have died, and you've seen death in your medical school career, and you've, kind of seen this face. You can tell. Post-Impressionism, I focused on 3. We have Paul Gauguin. Here, Post-Impressionism was a reaction that goes beyond Impressionism. They like the colors, but they, especially Van Gogh, used colors that may not be there to show emotion. There were different post-impressionists were kind of loosely banded together. It's probably a poor term because each one of them was so individual. For example, Gauguin here was more of you would call a symbolist post-impressionist. He would call himself that and would argue that that's what it's about. Whereas Van Gogh would be more of an expressionist painter, and Cezanne more of he was more interested in the geometric shapes and the way that the paint could convey weight or composition. Okay, so that's Gauguin. Sort of known also, I should mention, Gauguin is seen as sort of a despicable character as he escaped, kind of went to Tahiti to show that the native, the advantages of the native culture as opposed to the hectic Paris culture. But really he had went there and he married a 13-year-old and was there with the it seemed like a lot of despicable things he did there in the name of art and culture that are just despicable. You may have heard that. So just bringing that up. Paul Cézanne, you can see here his basket of apples he's famous for. The weight of those apples pushing down on that sheet. They look like they're made out of granite. And then see the geometrical shapes of landscape. He's sort of known for, and also kind of a precursor to a lot of modern art. They'll mention Cézanne. Vincent van Gogh, I'll give another talk about him later in the spring. I hope you can make. I know a lot about him, studied him for a long time, and was lucky enough to go to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam when we were there this year. They don't have this painting there, but I saw just about every other one, and it's just unbelievable. So obviously loose brush strokes and showing some motion and color that may not actually be there. You don't see the clouds doing that, or the the sky, doing that at night. So here's some of my stuff over the years. I did some, I guess you could say I'm an artist if I sold some paintings at auction for charity events. Here's some of my stuff through the years. My first foray into more digital art. Here's some things I've done this year, just as I've had more time to do it, dedicate to it. It's been very enjoyable. Some of my other illustration stuff. Not about me though. These are the artists that we talked about today. Kind of got a lot of them in. And you know, it was meant to kind of show you some good art through the years, and hopefully you could enjoy looking at that stuff. And here's some of the art from previous students through the years from this class that I'm just going to scroll through fairly quickly as running up on time. This course meant for people to try for the first time if they've never painted or drawn or and just try it. It's a lot of fun. Take your mind off the day-to-day stuff. One of my favorites here. This dragon was made out of the scales on the back. The large scales are made out of hotel room keys that she cut up that she acquired during her residency interviews, and then the little scales on the body are from pamphlets from those interviews from different some students painting years ago, and I was able to offer that in our kind of side offices one day, just paint what they wanted. Some other art from students. This is a paint scale that Dr. Caudill sent me, and it has a lot of the artists on there that we talked about today. It's kind of funny. And as I see, I'll see that anybody has any questions. You can always reach out to me. Again, if you didn't, as most of you couldn't make today's lecture, I recorded it, and I will make that available to everyone. I thank you for joining, and have a good day.